right, well, thank you everyone for coming. We're so excited to have Eliza Day-Green with us today for this artist talk to learn more about her work in memory of trees and about her residency in Iceland, which really inspired this whole body of work. We're really grateful for you to be here today.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so here we have ratir, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about ratir, which is kind of what inspired you to go to Iceland in the first place, from what I remember.
Right.
Yeah.
So first of all, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for sharing my vision for this exhibit and really elevating it with your curatorial insight. So I'm super grateful, and also very grateful to everybody who's here today, braving the biggest LA rains we've had in a while.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And everybody who's tuning in on the live stream, thank you too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was really fortunate enough to be accepted to go on a month-long art residency in Iceland. And one of my decisions to go, particularly in September, was because in Iceland they have this very old sort of famous ritual to do with their sheep, which is ratir, which basically translates as corralling the sheep. The sheep in Iceland, they are called the happiest sheep on earth because they get to roam in this like amazing country. There's very few natural predators. And the whole process of ratir is a big community event because you're gathering the sheep, and you're not necessarily just gathering your own sheep. You know, you gather any sheep you can gather, and then there's a sorting process afterwards. So we were very honored to be able to participate one day in this process, exhausting process of doing the sheep gathering. And I got to, walk along the fjord where we were staying, up and down the fjord, helping kind of corral the sheep back up to the main road so that they would get back to the farm for the winter. And this process usually takes about anywhere from 3 weeks to a month because there's always stragglers. The Icelandic sheep definitely have a mind of their own, and sometimes they do not want to be taken back to the farm.
And I love this photo of you and I assume 2 other artists.
Yes, so I was so fortunate to be with these 2 other amazing women, Monica Hampton and Dr. Laurie Kent, who were there. And of course, I think this is either Max or Ida, I'm not sure, but the amazing sheepdogs that helped us when we were out doing the sheep gathering.
Yeah, and I love that you can kind of see the sheep like dotting the hills, right? Like you explaining, you have to go out and corral them all. And it's reflected in ratir, the piece right over here, where the sheep are starting to come in and, come home for winter in little groups of them, or, still dispersed, but like, wandering back, a little stubborn, but, still doing that.
So this was a really fun installation piece. We had a great time figuring out where we were going to place it. And so inside each of the pods are these hand-felted balls of Icelandic wool. We'll talk a little bit more about the wool, but very grateful to our host at the farm where we were staying, who gifted us wool to work with.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and speaking of the wool, right, there's also the family connection.
Yes.
From New Zealand, where your family is like known sheep herders, right?
Well,
or sheep farmers?
Okay. Yes. So one of the unexpected things about doing the residency in Iceland was how incredibly connected I felt to my family back in New Zealand. And I hadn't expected that at all. But Iceland, in many ways, because of its amazing natural beauty and sort of wilderness, did remind me of New Zealand. In fact, it became a little bit of a joke when I was there with the other girls. We'd be driving somewhere and I'd say, you know what this reminds me of? And they're like, oh, don't say it, it's New Zealand, right? But then, of course, the sheep and the way people work with the sheep, obviously that was a connection to my family. The many people who were sort of related to that kind of work, textiles, sheep wool.
Yeah.
And this is a great picture. I contacted my family in New Zealand when we were talking about the connection. And this is actually my second cousin, Amanda, when she was 13. And her family were raising sheep, and there was a terrible storm coming in. And they had to get the sheep from under the trees and onto the main road so that they'd be safe from the falling trees. And it happened that a photographer for one of the local newspapers was driving by, sort of recording the storm, and he stopped and said, "I think one of your sheep is like going into, is lambing, is about to have the babies." And so Amanda's father went ahead and delivered the 2 baby ewes, and the photographer said to Amanda, "Will you get into the shot?" And so she did, and it made like the front page of a Central Otago newspaper, and then it won an award, a Qantas Award, for being outstanding press photo. Yeah. And it's a very wonderful picture, I think, because you can really see the storm looming behind and sort of how difficult it is dealing with the livestock and making sure that it's safe, and the lambing. I love that photo.
Yeah, it's a really nice photo. But yeah, speaking of, so these are kind of some of the New Zealand sheep, I believe.
Yes, so this was a picture I took last time I was in New Zealand that was right before I went on the residency. In fact, it was in New Zealand that I made the decision that I was going to apply for it. And then just driving along in Central Otago, where my brother lives, you see the sheep. It's a little bit, merino, beautiful merino, New Zealand merino sheep here. These are the very high-end wool that you get from the merino sheep.
And this is some of the process.
Yeah, some of the process in New Zealand with the merino fleeces. It's a very different kind of wool from the wool that I worked with in Iceland.
Yeah, and this is another one of my favorites, I think, that you shared.
Yes.
Where, you're sniffing and experiencing the wool.
This is such a
sheared.
fun memory. So this is Beggy, our wonderful host at the farmhouse, and he gifted us tons of fleece that we could work with, and we were washing it, and I don't know why we were smelling it. I think we were smelling it to make sure it was clean, but it seems like it's important to smell it. So.
Yeah, of course.
And then a map of Iceland behind me. This is in the kitchen. We sort of had to figure out how we were going to work the wool and wet felt it. So we found some plastic and we laid it out on the kitchen table, and we were hand washing the wool and then laying it out and wet felting it.
Yeah.
And then once it was clean, going through working it. It's a fun process. It makes your hands super soft because of the lanolin in the wool.
Yeah.
So this is basically a whole fleece that I got to work with, raw fleece. And I think, do we have the next picture that's the loom one?
Yes, the peg loom.
Yeah, so one of the wonderful things about being in Iceland was sort of connecting to traditional techniques. And this is actually a peg loom, which is the oldest form of weaving. And I think it dates, I don't know where it dates back to, but pretty sure to the Vikings. Yeah. And so this is then me directly using those pieces of raw fleece and working on the peg loom. And just more, this is once the wool is cleaned and felted, the beautiful natural colors. These are not dyed, this is the natural color from some of the sheep that we were working with their fleece.
Yeah, and I can kind of see, I don't know if these in particular were used for retier, but all of the natural colors also.
Yes, these are all the natural colors of the sheep.
Yeah, I love that. And let's move on to talking about the farmhouse and your experiences there. And I know you shared, and we'll go through them, but you shared a lot of inspirational photos of different stitching, cross-stitch pillows and artworks that were in the house.
Yes.
And I assume inspired a lot of the color choices and textures and
Absolutely.
ideas especially. But yeah, so this is kind of the overview of
So yeah,
where you were.
this is Brecka, which was the farmhouse right at the end of the fjord. So if you looked out, if you see the top of the house, the whole top of the house was a converted studio space, which was beautiful, and you could look out on different sides. So on one side you'd see the sheep, on the other side you'd see the fjord, which was ever changing. You know, every day I'd look out of my bedroom window and I'd see a different kind of view. It was always beautiful.
Always different.
This is my little room at Brecka.
Yeah, so the window, I assume you...
So yes, you would open in the morning, I'd open up and I'd think, I wonder what I'm going to see today. And you open up the curtains.
I love that.
Look out.
Yeah. And so some of the stitching.
Yeah, so it was so comforting to me and I don't know who did all this stitching, but in the house where we were, it was almost like a little time bubble. You feel like it hadn't changed for years, and I wanted to record all the handwork that was actually in the farmhouse. This one was actually in my room, so I loved that piece. And I don't know who did these, if they were always there, or if they were gifts, or if other artists had done it and left it there. It was sort of magical.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you took photos of them.
I had to record all the handwork.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's all beautiful. And then, do you mind talking a little bit about this piece, which isn't in the exhibition for a very good reason?
Yes. So, so on the fjord, there's a lot of hooper swans. Hooper swans are amazing. And we could hear the calling. We were sort of right at the end when they were about to migrate, and they migrate to England, which for me was an interesting connection. I collected tons of feathers, hooper swan feathers. You'll see in some of the work in the show, there's a couple of pieces that are homage to the swans. And then also at Brecka in the studio, there were these pieces of knit pieces that were just left behind and not finished, that people had obviously started and left there. So on the day before we left, I was feeling very emotional about leaving. I took some of the knitted pieces that were left over and some of my knitted pieces that were left over, and I found this old mannequin in one of the storage places, and I cleaned it up, and I just created this little sort of homage piece to leave at the residency.
Yeah, and you had this like really lovely note: in this creative space you'll take flight and soar.
So I know I'm going to like get emotional. But I just wanted to leave something, you know, there. So for artists that were going to come later, or people that would come and stay there.
Yeah, it's really lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then very big event, the blizzard, right, or the storm, right? The winter storm.
So they had it was getting right towards the end of the residency, and there was like the worst blizzard in September in 40 years. So we actually got snowed in, and we lost power at the farmhouse, and it was dramatic in the sense that the house was shaking at night, and you know, we lost the power, but it was also kind of strangely beautiful as well.
And I love this, right? The animals like huddling in.
So this is why the Icelandic sheep are incredibly hardy. They are the most hardy sheep because they live a long time, and they give so much in terms of meat, wool, but they are really hardy animals.
Yeah, they live through this. Yeah. And this,
so that's the back of the house. But I like this picture. I'm glad you included it because it really relates to some of the work behind me. So whiteout and blackout in particular. Yeah, I love the architecture. You can see like the lines and like the farmhouse kind of influencing the graphic. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's really interesting also for these two pieces in particular, that you chose to weave like a center and then like recreate that weaving through like mixed media around the frame of it. Could you talk a little bit about
that thought process, or, you know?
Yeah, so these, it's kind of interesting, and we talked about this a little bit as well, is that some of the works came together in Iceland, and some of the works came together once I came back. And the weavings in the center of these pieces are weavings that I'd done a long time ago, which I never knew what to do with them. They were just in my studio. And in fact, I want to give a shout out to another artist here, my friend Andre B. Carter. She and I share a lot of ideas because we work often in similar ways. So this idea of putting fabric or putting stitching or putting embroidery into the canvas is something that we both do, and that she's really, you know, helped me formulate some of the process as far as that piece is concerned.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So it's very cool.
Yeah. But I love, just really quick, I really love that, like, far away, it all looks like the same surface, and then up close you can see, oh, it's a textile, and then it's like painted.
And that's sort of what I wanted to try and do, was like there'd be this push-pull between what's fabric and what's not fabric. And sort of integrate the paint and the mark making in a way that it could be fabric.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And this is another one of my favorite photos, and I just want to show it next to Memory of Trees, the title piece. And I love the line work, right, with like this really beautiful, like, sweeping snow that's just kind of echoed in your painting as well. Yeah. Is there anything in particular you want to talk about Memory of Trees piece with?
Yes, I can talk. This is another piece that actually started before the residency. I teach a ongoing art lab class online. I started doing that back when the pandemic started, and it's like a skills building class, so we always do something different, and everybody wanted to do paint pouring. So this started off as a demo piece in that class, with paint pouring, and then it just sat in my studio unfinished. And then when I got back from the residency, and I of course looking at those photos like the one you showed, I kept seeing trees. I kept seeing, and I was like, well, why am I seeing trees? Because, you know, there are no trees in Iceland. That's the irony about this show, is it's called Memory of Trees. But the first thing you notice when you go to Iceland is that there are no trees. There were trees many, many years ago, but the island was decimated because of the Viking invasions. They cut all the trees down for their longboats and their housing, and the island never got back to where it was with their forests, and so that's how this piece started and finished, and then became the sort of namesake for the show.
It's beautiful. And so I think you mentioned, like, while you were stuck inside during the blizzard, you really turned to making these little magical people, right?
Yes. I think perhaps I was losing my mind. I don't know.
Maybe. No. They're all beautiful. So do you want to talk a little bit about, like, why you started doing this little project? These aren't included in the exhibition. I think you gifted a lot of them.
I did, yeah.
Yeah,
So we'd been working with the wool, you know, and it's a strenuous process, you know, the washing, the drying, and then, you know, because we couldn't go out because of the weather. We could go out for like a walk, but we couldn't drive. It would be terrible to drive in those conditions. I had taken, just sort of on a whim, these little peg people with me, and I started like thinking about, you know, the magic of Iceland and the little people and the hidden people that sort of play tricks on people. And so I created these little magical families. This is the Fjord family.
And so sweet. It's just so sweet. Yeah.
And then this is the Moss family, and I gifted this to my friend Laurie because we called her Fun Facts Laurie at the residency, because she always had these wonderful references to whatever we were doing. So if we were if I was working on a Moss piece, she'd say, you know, I have a great podcast we can listen to. And so we listened to a great podcast about moss. So
that's wonderful.
She got the Moss family.
The Moss family.
And then this is the Viking family, and I ended up leaving those at the residency to protect the farmhouse.
Yeah, I love it. I love this photo of them in the snow as well. It's really nice. And another obvious thing that I think inspired, right, we talked about a little bit earlier in the talk, was the landscape of Iceland.
Yes.
So we have a few photos, probably not nearly enough, but yeah, a few of the photos.
It's just dramatic, and rainbows all the time, rainbows.
Crazy, yeah.
Just spectacular.
Like, was this the farmhouse?
The farmhouse is probably over here,
okay.
and this is one of the barns that was in the process of being converted. But you just look out and suddenly like, oh, I'm at the end of a rainbow. You know,
that's amazing.
Magical.
And I love that you can see some of those elements and those colors and textures repeated in Kintigata, right? And especially, right, the little people, right, we had just talked about, they're kind of in there as well.
Yeah, the little people found their way into this piece, especially the Viking, the Viking couple at the bottom.
Yeah, and I love that you have like a little peeks of the Icelandic maps that were in your house or in your room as well. Do you want to talk a little more about this piece in particular?
Sure. Well, those of you who know me know that I'm obsessed with maps. I love maps, I collect maps, and maps often find their way into my collage pieces. And then, so when I was at the residency in Brecka, I had maps up in my room. I'd collect them wherever we went, and then it would become sort of my decoration in the room. And then I brought them all home with me, and the maps are the basis now for those, for this collage piece. And then the word Kintigata was a word that I kept hearing, and apparently, if what I was told is correct, it can mean a lot of different things, but it was used mainly as a word to describe the path that sheep forge to find their way home. And so there's a very sort of interesting phenomenon amongst the Icelandic sheep, which is called a leader sheep, which is a sheep that identifies itself as a leader. And a leader sheep is a great thing to have, because a leader sheep will help the flock get back home if it's stranded. The stories of a leader sheep saving a shepherd and the flock in times of disaster. So Kintigata is this trail that is created by a clever leader sheep that has sure footing and knows the way home. So this was sort of my idea for this piece, you know, everything leading, all the memories of the trip and the residency, and sort of finding your way back home.
Yeah, I love that. That's really beautiful. And a little close-up. And then, of course, had to include
the famous black church, which was a big inspiration.
Stunning, yeah.
It's really dramatic.
Yeah. And you can see, like, some of the lichen, right?
Yes.
I love it. So, kind of moving into the Nordic blooms.
Yes.
And just in general, right, talking about how they could exist in the landscape and you could like pick them out and they're just kind of abstract forms. Right. But also this like these magical objects and like you thinking about Icelandic folklore and a lot of, you know, the fairy tales and things, the little people, right? Yes. And thinking about, right, the spinning that a lot of the women would do. Do you want to speak on that?
Yes. So, yeah, this is a great picture, I think, because it shows what's called a distaff, which is a tool that has always been used for spinning the wool. And it was a way to have the wool so that your hands were free so you could spin. So thinking about that and thinking about how in literature a lot of times they would equate the distaff to witchcraft. And some things I've read as well have even said that actually a witch's broomstick, it wasn't actually a broomstick, it was a distaff. So there's all these kind of, and there's a lot of sorcery and magic and history of wizardry in Iceland. So I think that's sort of my idea behind the Nordic blooms. But again,
Yeah.
I have to give a shout out to another artist who's here.
Really?
Shula. Shula took a class, I think, at Craft Contemporary, which was, what was the class? Wrapping, a wrapping class. And she contacted me and said, I love this wrapping, but I don't have any yarn. Can I come over and look at your stash? So I said, come on over, we'll wrap together. So that was really the start of all these pieces. Some of it was created in Iceland, like the hyperbolic crochet pieces and the beads that were wrapped and the felted balls. I'd already done those in Iceland, and I was just trying to figure out how it was all going to come together. And so that's sort of the background to those pieces.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, they're really stunning in the corner if you haven't looked yet. But yeah, moving into the yellow lichen and green moss pieces, which are really stunning and look exactly, you know, like what they're named after.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the inspiration for those is pretty obvious when you look at the yellow lichen on the rocks in Iceland and the moss that you see.
Yeah. So really beautiful texture in some of the moss. Yeah.
So I was really taken by the soft and hard textures throughout Iceland, and I think it's an amazing metaphor for the country. There's hardness, harsh lives, but there's also great softness and whimsy and play.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to bring that out in the work.
Yeah. And, you know, thinking also about like the textures from the lava and the magma and, you know.
Yes, so very sort of serendipitous. When we were there, one of the volcanoes right outside of Reykjavik was actually active, and it hadn't been active in a long time, and we did get to go and see the volcano. And almost for me, more dramatic than the actual active lava was this, the lava fields of the dried lava, which to me kind of looks like the wool. And so I had to do a piece based on that.
Yeah. And so there's a diptych, there's one red one, and then this
So
gray
this is the lava field once it's dried, and then the red one obviously is the active volcano.
Yeah. And so then we move into progress, right? Your creative process.
Yeah.
Works in progress. So this is your desk
This is my workspace at the residency.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that you can like see all that's going on, and then also like peek out the window as well.
Yes.
Yeah. You can kind of see like the start of the projects.
Absolutely, beginnings of the projects, and then trying out some techniques. Nordic needle binding is an ancient technique, which is incredibly difficult, which I tried. And so that the center of this piece is the actually needle binding, which is done with one tool, which is actually made out of bone originally. Now you can get them in wood, but
interesting.
And then you can see the lace.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Do you see the lace at the bottom?
Right here. Oh yeah,
That was
this corner.
Yes, gifted to me by Shula, and I took it with me, and that became the pieces in the two volcano pieces.
And the beginnings of yellow lichen.
Yes.
Yeah. And this wasn't included.
No, this is a piece that I didn't end up in the show. I didn't end up finishing it. But I wanted to kind of replicate what I was seeing once the snow was thawing, and thinking like the wool was the snow. I think I will finish it.
It's beautiful. When you sent this, I was like, oh, where's this piece?
Where is this piece, Eliza?
I remember seeing it. Yeah. And then the beginnings of this one in front of us, really beautiful. I loved seeing it flat. And all the texture, and you building up on that. And this, you started in Iceland, or?
No,
okay.
So this is very interesting. So this piece, which is called Under the Mooring, or forget what I called it.
Oh.
Under the mooring ball.
Yes.
So at the top of the fjord where we were was a abandoned mussel factory that had been active, but because of the pandemic, it was no longer being used. And so it was interesting to see the detritus of the factory there, like the old buoys, the ropes, the mussels. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring back mussels from Iceland with me because I'd be stopped at the airport, I'm sure. But I was very fortunate enough to be artist in residence in Maine in June, and I was staying in this beautiful Castine, Maine, and there was a lot about that coastal area that reminded me of things in Iceland, of course, the buoys and the mussels. So I did pick up some mussel shells that I used in this piece. And I was very fortunate to meet an amazing textile artist there, Cynthia Boyer, who we connected because she was very much into felting, and she loved the way that I was working with felt and painting. What she said, oh, you're doing what I used to do, you're painting with felt, which is what I like to do.
Yeah.
And so she gifted me this piece of felt,
Oh, really?
which was from a jacket that she did a lot of beautiful high-end felted pieces of clothing.
Yeah.
And she said, I want to give you something. I don't have anything except for this little piece from a jacket. And she gave it to me, and I loved it because it had all the colors that I just gravitated to. And I was thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And I was like, I know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Like, it finally was a resolution for doing this piece. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really lovely story. Yeah. And then this, getting built. And this is also at your residency in Maine, or visit in Maine, I guess. I don't know.
This was actually in Vermont.
In Vermont,
so, okay. Almost a year to the date of the residency, I had a reunion with the two other artists, with Monica and Laurie. And they both live in New York, and we went to Vermont together and stayed in a cabin in Vermont. And Laurie bought all the supplies to do cyanotypes, which is a process I hadn't really explored before. But I took the hoop of swan feathers that I'd collected with me, and we did cyanotype, and it was fantastic. It's such a great process.
Yeah. And some of the maps.
These are the maps in my room.
Some of the maps
that end up in that
Yeah.
piece.
And this is in your studio, right? You did this entire piece after the fact, after the residency.
Yeah.
So you're like meditating on all the things that you experienced and translating them into this piece.
Yeah, I'm not very good with words, so I don't write a diary. But whenever I go somewhere and I have a significant experience, I try and do a memory piece. So this is pretty much the first thing I did when I got back, was this memory piece. I had to look at all the bits of ephemera that I'd collected and put it all together and retrace my steps.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's beautiful. And then a close-up of Memory of Spring, which is something that you had also started before the residency and then completed after. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
So obviously I wasn't there in spring.
Yes.
But I had this idea that because the winters are so harsh, I kind of felt, wow, that feeling when you see the snow melt and you see that first blade of grass or that first flower come up, how impactful that must be. And again, the woven pieces in the middle are not pieces I did at the residency. I didn't have access to a loom. But then I thought about a way of integrating them into, instead of just putting it in the canvas like in these pieces, I was interested in sort of exploring that weaving technique more and actually weaving the canvas as well. So
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely an evolution of your thought process for the blackout and the whiteout, for sure. So I guess that's all for process. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll just make a comment.
Oh, sure.
Really, I am so impressed with how you from having been to Iceland.
cultural things. Like I loved how when you go there, I mean, all the stories of the folk tales.
Yes.
Everything is so present there, and you really captured all the aspects of Iceland beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Mary
Talk a little bit about, like, when you left here to go there, did you have a plan? Or, I mean, what's your artist process, like your daily waking up? I mean, is there a plan? Are you more like observational and you let things, because it sounds like things like evolved out of you way after the fact and even before, like, can you talk about like the integration of your process and coming up with a series like this?
That's a great question, and I'm really happy that you asked that. When I knew I was going on the residency, I really didn't quite know what to expect. But I have an amazing artist friend in Menorca called Judy Tur, who I spoke with quite a bit about what should I take, what techniques should I use. She's the one that actually taught me the hyperbolic crochet. And so that was a start. I thought, okay, well, I know I can take some yarn with me. I'll have access to some yarn. I'll take my crochet hooks. I'll take my felting kit with me. And so I kind of went with that and then was sort of open to what would happen. I am quite disciplined about working, so I did get up in the morning at the residency and go upstairs and with my tea, and I would sit at the table and just experiment. And some things never came to fruition, and some things were the seeds that then became part of the pieces that are in the show. But it sort of takes a village. I mean, I want to give a shout out to everybody that influenced me, helped me, gave me tools or techniques or actual gifts of fabric to work with. So, yeah.
That's lovely.
I was curious about, because I don't know your prior work, whether a lot of this was kind of groundbreaking new work for you, and were you primarily a painter prior to this? But then I see these little woven pieces, so I imagine that you were weaving, but you talk a little bit about
Yes.
what led up to.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I do have a background in textile design. I worked in the textile industry in LA, but mainly surface pattern design as opposed to actual weaving or knitting. And this is one of the things that's interesting about the New Zealand connection. People often say to me, how do you know how to wet felt? How do you know how to do needle felting? How do you know how to do this? How do you know how to crochet? Well, I actually don't know. So I think it's because I come from this tradition of women who know how to do that. And I always remember my mom knitting, making clothes, and I must have absorbed that from her. But so it definitely was a sort of a coming home. It's the kindergarten feeling.
Yeah.
I came home to what I knew before. But you're right. I mean, my work before was much more painting and mixed media, collage. And this is a real leap back into sort of the fiber arts for me.
Yeah.
Leslie.
Did you know when you went on the residency that you were thinking to create a body of work and put on an exhibit? And then whether you did or not, is there anything that you've observed about your work because you've now created it as a body here for this, as opposed to maybe when you were working on them individually?
So yeah, that's a great question. I don't think going out there I thought, oh, I'm going with this purpose to create a body of work and have an exhibit. I went to have an experience and to grow as an artist. But it was such a phenomenal experience. I feel like I couldn't have done justice to the experience if I didn't kind of put in some serious work. And I know some people were saying to me, you're still working? You're still working? Because it's been a year. It was literally a year's worth of work. You're still working on that Iceland stuff? You're still working on it? Like I could just process it all like that. But yeah, I felt like it needed some really serious work, internal work on my part, of course, and the external work that came out of the experience. So, didn't go with a plan particularly.
You were talking about wet felting versus dry felting. What can you kind of explain that? Like, are these pieces here? Like, I don't understand that part.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, so that's a terrific question. So these pieces, the background to these pieces is crocheted panels that I did with the Icelandic wool with a very tight stitch, a single crochet stitch, and they were wet felted so that it would really like felt up and be tight and become my canvas for the needle felting on top and the stitching on top. And actually, I'm going to do a workshop on the 28th, and that's exactly what we'll be doing if you guys want to come.
Hang out. Yeah.
You want to come out, hang out and come to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously we won't wet felt at the workshop because you need a lot of space, so I will pre-do the panels for you and then we'll work on them with the dry felting.
Yeah.
So.
I have one last question.
Yes.
What does it feel like to have it all done completely? Are you going to continue in this vein? Are
Great.
you finished? Like, what's your process like as an artist? Do you just set it aside, or do you feel like there's more of this story to tell about going back to your roots and your textiles and these things of the earth that you've created?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I do feel a big sense of relief that it came together, and I'm so grateful, as I said to Anissa, for helping me really, because not all the pieces that I worked on are in the show. But you know, you get too close to the work and you can't see. I'm going to use a very silly pun of the forest for the trees. Yeah. You can't see it, so you need somebody with an eye and an understanding to kind of edit everything for you, which Anissa did, I think, beautifully. I think the textile element will always be, moving forward, a part of my work. Maybe not so wool intense as it's been over the last year, but there'll always be a part of that in my work. I want to explore the cyanotypes some more. That was a new process for me, which I really enjoyed, because it's unpredictable and you don't know what you're going to get, and I want to explore that. I love doing the weaving the canvas, so I'd like to do that on a bigger scale. All the work in this show is quite small and intimate, which is sort of the way I wanted it to be, and some of that's, you know, the emotional intimacy of the experience, but also practicalities. I was traveling, I couldn't carry a lot of stuff with me, so now I'd like to, some of these techniques I'd like to expand and explore on a bigger scale. So that's sort of what I'm thinking now.
Lovely. Any other questions? No?
I have a comment.
You have a comment? Okay.
I think you are the leader sheep. And I can say that because we're, the three of us and Eliza are sort of a posse. And we got to know each other, and I'm not going to go on and on, but we got to know each other through Women Painters West, whatever. And we've stayed together. And I've always felt like we all have strong personalities, duh. But you are definitely the leadership. You definitely bring us back home. So I'm going to give you that.
That's so sweet.
You tried to make me cry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's beautiful. Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, if you want to take a look at the show, we're going to hang out for a minute if you want to chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.